Welcome to the Geek podcast, where we have the best of the rest for 2017. I'm Void, and I'm here with my co-host Beej.
I'm the best of the rest.
Okay, we are talking about media of the year, everything that's not video games, since we talked about that last week. And this is kind of our catch-all, we should probably preface this one, because last year we did best of the rest, and there were so many things, and I felt bad like cutting things off my top 5 list. This year I honestly struggled to find a top 5. Like, as much as there were so many good games this year that caught me and like grabbed my attention, and I loved spending time with them, I felt kind of the opposite with like everything else. Like, there were so few things that I latched onto. That being said, I am pretty happy with my top 5, but like it didn't feel like a super strong year for like books or movies or like anything. Yeah, it was weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, this year it was just like, I've looked back and I went through the archives, I looked at all of our show notes and made sure like what all we were talking about, and stuff didn't happen this year, that it was a very lackluster, and I shouldn't even say lackluster. There were some fantastic things that came out this year, but there was pretty much nothing to get super excited about for any extended period of time, and that was exceptionally memorable.
Yeah, and like looking at some of our like honorable mentions list that we're going to get into here in a second, a lot of the things we did latch onto were like parts of series that were already ongoing.
Right.
And it's not that those are bad, it is that we enjoyed them, but at the same time it's not as like interesting to talk about. It doesn't give you as much discussion point as something that's a brand new idea or a brand new topic. Do you know?
I absolutely know. Where there are things that I want to mention, like the honorable mentions, that's why we do this, where I want people to be aware of how good this is, but at the same time, I don't have any high-level thoughts about them, where it's like, I really like this, and you will like it too.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
Move on.
Exactly. Okay, so let's get into our honorable mentions now that we've said all that. I have less than you, so I'm going to go quick. So for books, I had the We Are Bob series. That was really interesting, the Van Buren probe, like self-replicating thing that I know I talked about every book as I did it through the series this year. The Red Rising series, which I think was on my list last year, the first one, and I finished the rest of the series this year. The first one had such a strong start, and the rest of the series was good, but not quite as good, which is why it's just an honorable mention. Collapsing Empire, which is the start of a new series from John Scalzi, which I always like Scalzi stuff. So that was worth my time. Did you not get to that one?
No, I totally forgot about it.
Yeah, you should get back around to it.
Like, I saw it on there, and I was like, I don't really remember what Collapsing Empire is. And then you said it was Scalzi, and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot completely about this book existing. And yeah, I haven't read it at all. Like, completely off my radar.
Yeah, put that one back on your radar. It's worth your time. For shows, movies, videos, I kind of lump all of these together because I view them the same way in my mind.
Right.
I had Game of Thrones season 7. Again, something that was really, really good. I like talking about it in the moment, but like it's but it's setting it up for the end, but it's not the end, and not a lot of huge things actually happened. Like, it was good. Watch it if you like Game of Thrones.
There were a few huge things that happened, but in terms of the rest of the seasons, this was fantastic to watch and not fantastic to really dwell on.
Yeah, it wasn't great to talk about afterwards. It wasn't as water coolery as other seasons have been. It was just kind of like, okay, we're going through the motions.
It's like,
I kind of know what's going to happen.
Did you see that dragon? And it's like, yeah, I did. And then you move on, you do your work.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Final Fantasy 14 no-clip documentary was fantastic. If you've ever played an MMO, or if you've ever played Final Fantasy, or if you've ever played Final Fantasy 14, if you fall into any of those categories, like, seriously, go watch that documentary. It is fantastic.
Or Final Fantasy 11, actually. It made me very interested in the localization of Final Fantasy 11 as well.
Yeah, good point. Logan, I thought Logan was really good. I didn't like it as much as other people, but it's probably because I'm not as attached to X-Men as other people. I like that it broke out of the superhero genre, though, and became kind of its own movie. It was a superhero movie, but that's not what it was about at all, and it made it so much better for that. And then Arrival. So Arrival, I want to say that might have actually come out last year, but I didn't see it until this year. Does that sound right?
I honestly don't remember when it came out, but I know that whenever I watched it, I wanted to talk about it with you, and you told me, no, I want to see this, stop saying things. And by the time you saw it, it was out of my mind, where I was like, yeah, that was so good, like, that was awesome, but I wasn't just all about, like, let's discuss how linguistics saves everything.
Yeah, and like I came to it late enough that people weren't talking about it, and I didn't remember barely anything from the trailer except that it was a sci-fi movie, and I think that actually made my experience a lot better because I didn't know what to expect going into it, and it just kind of blew me away. It was a really, really good movie. This is, if I had to pick one thing that was just off my list, like a number 6, it would be Arrival for sure. And again, when we do our end of the year, I know we said this last episode with the video game episode, it's what we experienced in 2017. It's not necessarily what came out this year, even though generally it is anyway. But yeah, that one, I don't know the release date, but I definitely watched it this year. And that was a great movie. And I don't know. I just love a good sci-fi movie that like makes me think afterwards. You know what I mean?
It was intellectual science fiction, and it didn't hit on any, like, at least it didn't hit on many of the same tropes that a lot of science fiction movies hit on, to where it was different enough to make it fantastic. It was just good storytelling.
Yes, very well said. For podcasts this year, Reply All. I'm really glad I went back to that one. I mean, it's just all things internet, which I know is very generic, but if you listen to it, it's like, yeah, it's probably the best description. So I'm glad that a listener put that into one of our comment threads on Reddit, and I was like, yeah, I should probably give it another shot. And then I ended up binging the whole thing in like one weekend, like all of their episodes ever. And then the other one I wanted to mention for podcast, which again, if we were doing more than top 5, this would probably be number 7. Like it's up there near the top, is Waypoint Radio. I think, well, in my opinion, Waypoint Radio is probably the best gaming discussion out there at the moment. Like they always look at current games in the wider context of the world and not just in like the insular gaming world, and because of that, it is great. Like that makes it so far above and beyond every other gaming podcast that I listen to that there's no comparison. Like if I had to get rid of every gaming podcast in my subscription feed, which is a lot, you guys know how much I listen to podcasts, and only keep one, I would keep Waypoint Radio. It wouldn't even come close to anything else in my feed. So that is really good one. It's worth your time if you listen to any gaming stuff at all. Yeah, but those are my honorable mentions. Hit me with yours.
Okay, so for books this year, like I haven't read a lot. So I believe it was this year that it was the Ash and Bone series. Like I've been getting this year and last year confused because this year was kind of empty.
Well, and this is what we were talking about, like the series blended together. So like the first book of Ash and Bone I thought was amazing, but the particular one that came out this year, which is the only one in that series I actually read this year, I thought was the weakest so far. Right.
And it's good. Like it's fantastic, it's good, and I cannot wait for it to get through and get finished. It's definitely worth people picking up, and I wanted people to know about the Ash and Bone series to get them on Audible and listen to them, read them, whatever. And then the Final Fantasy V boss fight book was awesome. That when the boss fight books are about video games, and it's kind of a journalistic approach on the culture around certain games. And the Earthbound one was awesome. And then we got approached by the writer and had copies of the Final Fantasy V one sent to us, and it was just super good. Like going through it, it's a quick read. I read it on my phone as I was sitting in a doctor's office one day, and just really interesting, really good. I think you guys would really like it, especially if you do the 4-job fiesta and you've liked listening to Void talk about that. Just the idea of the job system and how all of it came about, just and the localization into English and why it never came to America, just super good. But those are the honorable mentions on books that I had. Like that's really all that I cared anything about this year. And like in terms of movies, books, and videos and all of that, Spider-Man Homecoming is in there. I liked it a lot more than you did, but I haven't watched it again. Like it came out.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I loved it. Like I was all in when I saw it. Now I'm just like, okay, it's out. I'll see it again eventually at some point. All right. And that's okay. It was good. I enjoyed it. I'll see it again. The same for Guardians 2. Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is everything that you would want out of a Guardians of the Galaxy sequel and nothing more. I did not feel as though it added anything to it. So for me, it's just like, okay, it's there. I liked it. Good Mythical Morning I found this year. I only found it just recently, but I have enjoyed it enough that I consistently watch 1 or 2 of their videos every day. And I don't know if you've done it yet, but have you watched any of Good Mythical Morning yet?
I have not, no.
Okay, like there are some things that they do that are just totally ridiculous, and it's one of those YouTube channels that's like, it's just funny to me. Like one of the videos I watched recently was they were trying, their crew took like full meals and blended them together in a juicer. Like they juiced entire meals and had them drink it and try to guess what it was, and I laughed so hard at that. Like they blended Taco Bell, or they juiced Taco Bell, and it was just, those kind of things are hilarious to me. So I really like Good Mythical Morning, and the hosts have a wonderful rapport with each other. They're fantastic. I also really like Master of None. We finished it up, season 2 of it. So good. Still there. Still, I've rewatched part of it. I love it. Just the relationship between Dev and his best friend make me so happy. The big buddy, little buddy vibe just makes me happy. Master of None, so good. The Great British Baking Show. If I had a number 6, this may be my number 6, actually. Like, I was toying whether or not the Great British Baking Show was going to be on my list, and I just found out that there's an extra season on Netflix, and I've only seen 1 season of it. I am so excited. I love Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood. That they are 2 of my favorite people on earth. And I think what makes me like this show better than anything else, I've mentioned it before on here, that I think that this particular show gets me because the people are nice to each other. They want each other to do well. They help each other whenever something is going wrong. And there's not a monetary prize, that they get a cake plate. And it is the recognition of doing this that can then spur a career, but there's no money prize. It's not like they're getting $50,000. So I think that makes it where it's less sensational. I like British TV because it's less sensational than American TV. Again, Vet Ranch, I cannot recommend it enough. I've talked about this YouTube channel before. Always got to give it a shout out as an honorable mention, because anytime it is the only YouTube channel that every single time a new video is posted on their channel, I watch it pretty much immediately. That I get an email or a notification that Vet Ranch has put up a new video, I watch it on the spot, or wait until if Jennifer and I are going to be home together soon, we watch it pretty much as soon as we sit down at night. Like, it is absolutely my favorite because it is a bunch of cute animals getting saved. I learn about veterinary science, and then I see them frolicking at the end. There's always a happy ending, and there are not nearly enough always happy endings in the world. So Vet Ranch is awesome. The Good Place, I mentioned a couple episodes back in my weekly Geekery, so you can go back and listen to that. I just wanted to put it on here. Super good. I was working on like my PhD thesis my PhD dissertation on Lost. So with this being like Lost meets Pushing Daisies and Dead Like Me, there's no way it cannot be on my honorable mentions. And then the 2 that I think are probably the absolute best on here, that really, I guess I shouldn't say the best, but they're the 2 that affected me the most. The first one is American Crime Story, season 1.
You said that one was not what you thought it was going to be, but it ended up being good, right?
No, I thought I was going to hate this because I don't like Ryan Murphy shows. He did American Horror Story, Glee, goodness gracious, I'm losing my... I think maybe he did Scream Queens. Like, I do not like this guy's shows in general, so I didn't expect to like this one, but within maybe 10 minutes of the first season of American Crime Story, I was hooked. It's an anthology show where every season is a different story and different cast. It's like American Horror Story in that way, or True Detective, and the first season of this covers the O.J. Simpson trial from the 90s. And part of this, the reason it is so good is because I'm a 90s kid, and this was such a cultural phenomenon when I was a kid that I knew what was going on, but I was too young to understand anything about it. Like, I had no idea about the greater, like, racial implications. I didn't understand legal nuance. I had absolutely no clue about any of the, like, people involved in it. And the acting in this is so good that David Schwimmer, Ross from Friends, David Schwimmer is astounding as Robert Kardashian, that I never thought that I would really love David Schwimmer as an actor, and this show makes me really, really appreciate him. That it is a very good show, and the worst part about it is actually OJ. The Cuba Gooding Jr. does not do OJ very well, but he is honestly not the focus of the show, so that's okay. Definitely worth checking out. We recommended it to somebody else recently who was as hesitant as I can assume that you are, and they started messaging us immediately saying, oh yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, I might check it out eventually. I don't know. I'm not into the true crime stuff.
I'm not
in
either.
general.
That's the thing. I'm not. I don't listen to them.
You kind of are. You kind of are.
I don't know.
You keep saying that, but then you tell me all these other true crime stuff that you get into. So I think you are. Well, it just has to be the certain kind. I just don't like it in general.
That's true. It might be a certain kind. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, like Girl Boss, like it got canceled on Netflix. Like there's one season of it, and that's all it's ever going to be. And it is so obnoxious that this show, there is a reason it got canceled. Don't get me wrong. I understand. I hate it that it got canceled, but I loved Girl Boss. And the reason that I love it is it hit right in that middle ground of media that I like, of super quirky media. So like it's weird, it's wacky, and then it also hits on that kind of millennial, like entrepreneur, we can do whatever we want vibe. Girl Boss kind of hit on that media that makes me want to create stuff, where it's like the No Clip documentary, or watching Indie Game, or the Tim Schafer Broken Age documentary by Double Fine. It makes me want to go out and do something. And so Girl Boss, watching this, even though the character was obnoxious, the acting was kind of middle of the road, I couldn't help but just love this because it hit on kind of those pressure points on that I as a person have, you know?
Yeah, I can see that.
If you're the kind of person like me who gets affected by seeing something that's like, I can do that, I need to go out and work on my side hustle. That's what this show did for me, and I just loved it for that. And then my podcast, like I found one that's kind of like Reply All. It's IRL by Mozilla. Have you listened to any of it?
No, you asked me that the other week, and I still have not.
Okay,
I don't know if I'm going to, but I'm glad you like it and you found it.
And I think that from what you described about Reply All, depending on the tone, you really might like IRL, because I love it. It's an internet podcast, but it's about like digital security and net neutrality and all of the slightly darker, more serious aspects of it, and how the internet intersects with real life. And I love it. I absolutely adore it. I'm always listening whenever I'm listening to podcasts with Code Newbie. The podcast is just awesome. She just restructured everything, and they do interviews with people who are just getting into the tech field in one way or another. And there's always a Twitter hashtag chat, I think on Sunday and Wednesdays, that even if I'm not partaking in, I'll just go back later and just read people's answers and see the stuff that they link. And I read the show notes on Code Newbie more than I do actually listen to the show, because it's just so interesting, and so many things get shared on there that it's a fantastic resource for people wanting to learn more about different areas of technology, coding, and web development specifically. And the same way with Buffer's Science of Social Media podcast, that whenever I'm listening to podcasts, that's one that I go to. I tend to listen to it while I'm on the treadmill, actually, that I like it a bunch because I just like learning about small ways to improve social media campaigns, interaction with people, and maybe honestly how I can get more conversations started on a personal level with people by being able to put out the right kind of message. So those are the podcasts that I tend to listen to the most.
Cool. And that's it for our honorable mentions. Yeah. Before we get into the actual top 5 best of the rest list for us, this is where we normally do weekly geekery, take a break. We don't do that in holiday episodes or end of the year episodes. Instead, you can get us a tiny virtual free present that costs you nothing but your time, called a review or a rating. Either one. We don't care. Actually, we do care. They're both really, really useful.
We do care. They're fantastic. Please do.
Yeah, we normally don't ask for them, so we try to ask for them only a couple times a year. This is one of those times, so we won't ask for it again for quite a while. So take this. This is your moment of action. This is what we call a call to action in marketing. I'm calling you to do an action. I'm showing you behind the scenes of marketing. Okay, taking my marketing hat off. No, seriously, like it helps us a lot. Like whatever you're listening to us on now, because I know that the Apple iPod like stuff is not a great listen to do podcast anymore. I'm on Overcast, wherever you are. Find a way to like or subscribe or follow or share or any of those things. We appreciate all of them. And then the other thing to say,
you can still load it up in iTunes and give a review there, because that's still where it gets distributed. And even if you can't do that, if you're frustrated, if you're on Android, you can tell your friends about it. So just share it and be like, hey, you guys, listen to our podcast. This is awesome. And they'll be like, thanks, buddy. And then they'll be listening to our podcast too.
While you are listening to this, you can leave this audio running and listen to the rest of the episode. And at the same time, you can download the podcast app, give us a review or rating, and then delete the podcast app from Apple, and it'll be great.
That's true. You totally can.
The other thing is everybody on the network is awesome. Everyone's killing it. I love it. Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea is fun to listen to every week. So is Geektitude. I always like the interviews and to hear something from a new person or to catch up with an old person. Like it's such a cool interview podcast. And the Comic Box with Rob, like I always want Rob's take on all of the comic book news and happenings and everything every week. Like I legitimately listen to all of our podcasts every week. So end of the year, we got to make sure to shout out all of them, because if you're not listening to them, you got to go give them a chance. Now's a good time.
And if you are listening to them, give them reviews and ratings too.
This is true. Everybody appreciates it. Okay, there. We're done shilling for reviews and ratings for a while. We won't touch on it for a while, I promise. Best of the rest. Let's get into it. Why don't you start with your number 5, because I already mentioned it.
My number 5 is actually Logan. And I stayed pretty quiet when you were talking about it, because it stood out to me a lot more than it did to you. And I've mentioned it a lot on this year. So I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail, but you said that it was still a superhero movie. And that's where I disagree with you. I don't think it was a superhero movie. It is absolutely a comic book movie. There's no way around it, but I don't get a superhero vibe from it. And this may be my English teacher, literary analysis kind of semantic hat coming on, but there was not anything in there that really did the superhero thing. Yeah, he had superpowers, all of this, but I don't think that's not the point. And I don't think that's really even the genre, that he is absolutely a Western hero. He is absolutely going through a Shane-style search for community, finding his place and coming to grips with his own mortality. And there is kind of looking at what's coming next. There's a frontier aspect of it where, because of it jumping in time and all of the bad things that have happened with Xavier and the X-Men already, that even without the context of the rest of the X-Men, that if this movie had been a creation all of its own, if it had stood out of the Marvel universe and this was just created, I wouldn't have assumed it was a superhero movie. I would have just assumed this was an action sci-fi fantasy, and I would never have attached the label superhero to it.
If you could divorce it from the rest of the work that has been done, but you can't at this point, which is why I disagree. And I think it's just a semantic thing, so I don't actually disagree
and it may
super
be, and
strongly.
that's what I'm saying. It might be that part of me where it's like, no, let's dig in.
Yeah, and, I mean, it's Wolverine. It's the same actor with the other same cast, like Patrick Stewart is there, from a bunch of movies that we've already seen where he is a superhero. Like he's a superhero. Like you can't escape it. If this was a standalone, like if it was a standalone movie and it was different actors and it was totally and completely divorced from everything done before it, like, okay, I buy your argument a little bit more. But at the end of the day, he's still Wolverine. He still was a superhero. Like, yeah, they did different things with it, and I don't think that superhero is a genre in the first place. I do agree. This is like a Western movie. That's not, but I don't know. It still has a superhero in it. Like, even if that's not what the role that he's playing in this particular movie.
See, and that's where, and that it is exactly when you started saying all that, I started thinking of all of this like genre hybridity, like English teachery literary theory, where it's like it's absolutely a semantic reasoning on how we feel about this, because you're absolutely right, and I'm just like, but where there's a lot to be said about this. That's why it's number 5. Is
we both
because
liked
of any.
It, though, is the thing.
Yes.
Like it's not worth arguing over, because we both liked it because it didn't do the normal superhero thing.
Exactly.
I liked it a lot too.
And that's exactly why it's number 5, is because Homecoming and Guardians and Thor Ragnarok, as awesome as it was, I completely forgot about Thor Ragnarok on this. Let's say that that's in my movies as well because it was awesome. But all of those are still the generic Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and I love them. This one was so different that we can have that conversation about, and that's why it's on my list of the top stuff.
Cool. I liked it a lot. I'm glad it made your list, even though it didn't quite for me, but I'm glad we got to talk about it. Number 5 for me is Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, which I know I've talked about before, and I don't know if it's made the cut in a season before, but I
don't think so.
I wanted to call out basically 2 series. So in there, he has a lot of standalone episodes, but he has like bigger episode chunks of series that are like multi-part. And yes. I know I've talked about some of those before, like Blueprint for Armageddon is probably the one that impacted me the most out of all of them. But this year I found Death Throes of the Republic and Ghosts of the Ostfront, and those 2 had probably just as much impact, but in different ways. So this was me going back through the catalog. I finally figured out a good way to listen through the back catalog because It's actually pretty hard with Hardcore History. You have to like buy them on iTunes or like, I don't know. It's really weird. Like the last 10 or so are always free and like available on any podcast app. And that's what I stay up to date on. But if you want to dig into the backlog, it's actually kind of hard. So I finally made time to do that this year. And Death Throes of the Republic is essentially the fall of the Roman Empire, not the actual like all the way through the fall, but it's like the inflection point that starts the turn towards like the downturn and like the slow degrading of the Roman Empire, and walking you through step by step how it happened and who the major players were over a couple generations, basically. I didn't know like anything about ancient Rome, and this was extremely informative, but also very interesting. And it was like a good story to listen to, as well as something that was good to learn. So Death Throes of the Republic was fantastic. And then
that's going to be the one that gets me into it. I know of just about anything that you've talked about with it with me and other people have told me about. I think that particular series is going to be the one to get me into it whenever I'm able to sit down and just devote my attention to it.
Yeah, it's really good. And then Ghosts of the Ostfront was another, again, multi-part series. And when I say multi-part, I'm talking about each episode is probably multi-hour, and some of the episodes alone get up to like 5 or 6 hours, and there's, 4, 5, 6 of them. So it's like, it's, audiobook length, if not longer than most audiobooks for like these hardcore history series. Ghosts of the Ostfront covers the Eastern Front in World War II, and I knew almost nothing about it. I mean, I know what I've learned from playing Call of Duty and other video games, which is sad to say, but it's true. I mean, yes. We don't really learn about that in our history classes as an American. Like I know about the Western Front, and I know about the war in the Pacific a little bit, and some of that I picked up more as an adult from like Band of Brothers and other forms of media, which probably, again, isn't the best way to learn about it, but whatever. But the Eastern Front and like the war between Germany and Russia, I knew almost nothing about outside of video games, like just being perfectly honest. And the amount of death that happened over there was so extreme, and I never realized it. And they talk about like, it's not the atrocities they talk about. It's like the fact that you can go to certain parts of Russia right now, and because of the way permafrost works, there are entire fields of ice where you can look down and just see the frozen bodies from World War II still. And it was like, what? Like, seriously? And it's just like miles and miles, hundreds of miles. Like, these fronts were gigantic. And, it just, again, it had a huge impact on me. So those 2 from Hardcore History make my top 5, like my number 5. So Hardcore History, there's all of these onboarding points, but those were the 2 that got me this year.
I don't even know how to, frozen bodies from World War II still in the permafrost.
Yes.
That honestly leaves me speechless and horrified, and I say horrified in the way that I describe it in terms of horror literature. That terrified means that you're scared of something, that it's that there is something that frightens you about it, and horror being something that is visceral and that kind of affects you on an emotional level that is just unbelievable. That's the way I feel about that. Like, I am horrified by the thought of that.
Well, and just the fact that there is such like a tragedy and like such it's
yeah, that's
it's,
what I mean. Just that happened. That's horrifying to me.
And the fact that
there's that preservation of it.
Yeah, and there's like a loss of life on such an epic scale, like truly epic in scale and scope, in a way that I never learned about. And I just, in American like history classes, we just kind of gloss over Eastern Front. That was other people, and then you move on. Like, yeah. So that's why it makes my number 5 spot for this year.
Yeah, so, and on a lighter note,
on a slightly lighter note,
my number 4 is
not
The
lighter
Handmaid's
at all.
Tale.
Oh my God, we're so depressing right now.
I know, it's like this.
I'm looking at what's up higher on our lists, and we're working our way up to stuff that's not this level.
It's not, but really, like, mine is equally horrifying in a lot of ways, but not as realistically horrifying. That if you have not seen The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, this is by far the best television show that I've seen in years. That I want to convince everyone in my life to watch it, because it is absolutely brilliantly acted, scripted, paced, and written. Just everything about it is about as perfect as you can get it, and that's what makes it horrifying. That there are moments in this that for no reason at all, and it's not the violence that happens, it's not any of that, it is absolutely sheer possibility that makes this physically painful to watch sometimes. And I know that some people don't like media that will affect them that way, and if that's the case, then you may not need to watch You may not need to watch The Handmaid's Tale, but if you're the kind of person who wants television and media that makes you think and really can affect you on and really affect you on an emotional level, and at the same time affect you on a personal level, The Handmaid's Tale is something to watch, because it's going to leave you. I always say that good media, good books, good movies, good podcasts, good video games will, at the end of it, you're not going to finish it and say, yeah, that was awesome. It's going to leave you, and you're just going to look at it and just say, huh. Those are the ones, no matter how awesome and action-packed they are, that are really lasting, the ones that make you think. And The Handmaid's Tale is one that every single episode, except for one, left me, in the way that made me consider it. And that's why it's on there. Like, it is, because it's so political, I don't want to get into a lot of that here. Like we did with, the Ghosts of the Ostfront and stuff like that. But the reasons The Handmaid's Tale is absolutely chilling is because of how realistic and relatable the flashbacks are. That it's just horrifying to the point where you can read it in a 1980s novel and see it playing out now, and the same happens on this, and you see it and it affects you differently. And this show affected me, and it made me consider the show. And I say that in the absolute best and most literary way possible, that as an English teacher, I want to write a paper on this television show, not Margaret Atwood's book. And that is saying a lot.
Wow, that's a big endorsement for you. I think it's actually too dark for me. I've tried to watch it a couple times now, and I think
it is.
I don't think I can
it
do
is.
it.
And it I'm afraid it's too dark for my wife. And I mean, Jessica Jones was so dark. Like just to give you an idea, Jessica Jones
is
dark.
So much darker than Jessica Jones. Like, it's
yeah. I mean, Jessica Jones made Jennifer have nightmares about Kilgrave months after she saw it because of how it was portrayed. I am afraid of people who get affected by media, that this could potentially destroy you emotionally. That if I weren't on depression medicines, depression and anxiety medication, I promise you that instead of being sick, I probably would have had a panic attack and not looked at any news sites.
Yeah, no, I can't do The Handmaid's Tale, but it's... No. You're right. It's like I watched enough to know that it is very well made and it's very impactful. And just like you said, we should probably also mention that like Katie and Chelsea with Tea Time on the network did a whole episode on this, and it was like really good to listen to and really in depth. It's a good discussion they got going. So if you want to hear more, check that out too. My number 4, it's interesting that you say that media should leave you sometimes with kind of a and like a thought, like
right.
I don't even think about it as like a but more like you leave there and then you can't quite get it out of your head and you just keep thinking about it even though you don't intend to. That's how I felt about the next 2 on my list. So I'm probably going to do the next 2 in order here. Okay. Your Name, which is an anime. And I swear that if I had a top 5 or top 10 list for this category, best of the rest, all the way back through my entire life, there would never have been an anime on it before now, but this one was good. It was really, really good, and it made me think a lot. It threw me off in a lot of ways. It misdirected me in some ways, and I don't want to spoil that for anybody who hasn't watched it. So I'm going to stay spoiler free, even though we normally go full spoilers in this episode. But I think that like to actually like engage with Your Name, you kind of have to go into it not knowing a lot, but it does some interesting things with people who are like switching places into each other's bodies. This is stuff that happens in the first 10 minutes. Like there's a boy and a girl who are roughly the same age, and on some days they just flip over and they're in the other person's body for a day, and they start to try to communicate like by leaving notes on their body or like notes around for the other person to see, and like setting limits, setting some rules, trying not to mess up each other's life, but also experiencing another form of like another person's life and the structure of it, because one of them lives in the city. He's like a city boy from Tokyo. The other one is a girl who lives in the country in Japan, and they have such different lives that like they give each other perspective on it because they have to live through days in the other person's life. That is where it starts. That is like the first 10 minutes, and then the back and forth stuff gets into the first half hour. It goes so many more places than that, but I don't want to spoil any of it, so I kind of have to leave it there. But to say it's really, really good, and that's one of the reasons out of the other spoilery reasons that it's my number 4. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it's one that I want to watch a lot, and one that you said earlier, I believe, if I'm remembering right, this one is only subtitled, and I can't imagine listening to this in English.
I think you can.
Is it?
Yeah, I think you can get a sub, you can get a dub, you can get it a bunch of ways. It was when I was looking for it, the only good quality one I could find at the time was a subtitle one. I think since we talked about it last, it has come out here in the US on like Blu-ray or something, so you can probably get whatever version you want.
Okay. I know sometimes there are really bad dubs, so I tend to, when it's something that is really, really well made, go for the subtitled, just because I don't want to have to deal with really terrible dubs.
Yeah, but some of the twists at the end of that made me think, right? Like I left that movie thinking, and I kept thinking back to it, and I really need to rewatch it because of that, which also gets to my number 3, which is Dark Matter, which is a book, one of the only books of the year that really, truly stood out to me. And Dark Matter is basically like a multi-universe theory type of book. It's not super spoilery to say that, even though it gives away a little bit in the first small part of the book, but it quickly gets into multiple universes, and the one guy that you follow who's traveling through them, like they basically have to take a drug and go into a special chamber, and if they do that, they pop out in another universe. And it's how every time that happens, there are consequences and side effects, and it's about trying to get back home and trying to get back to your universe in the multiverse, and how next to impossible that is, but it's something you need to strive for. And there are things in there like you get close, but you're not there. It's not your home. It's not your universe, right? There's like another copy of you there already, but it's so close. You were so close. And then you go back into it, you come out again, and you're in like a frozen wasteland because the world has been destroyed and frozen over with like nuclear winter. And it's like there are so many different worlds that he visits that are all in the same place at the same time. It's just different universes, and it was good. It was a good sci-fi story, and that's kind of like the part that I'm telling you about here. The last fourth of the book, there is some crazy stuff that happens that if you are interested, I do not want to spoil for you, because that's the part that left me thinking about this book for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah, because this sounds, I don't know if you've mentioned this before to me. I don't remember it at all.
Yeah, this is one I really think you should read. I think you would like it a lot.
This sounds like almost perfectly the kind of thing that I would get into.
It's good. It's really, really good, which is why it's my number 3 for the year. But again, I don't want to get into spoilers for this one because a lot of the time, spoilers I don't think are that important. Sometimes I listen to spoiler casts, and I've said this before,
Right.
and they make me more interested in a thing than I was before. But there are certain times where, like, because of what happens towards the end of a book or a movie or a piece of media, like, by giving that away, you actually diminish it. I think they're few and far between, much fewer and much like more far between than most people think. But Your Name and Dark Matter are 2 that are examples of this. So I'm going to leave it there, but just say that Dark Matter is a really good book. If you have any interest in sci-fi or multiverse theory at all, read that book. It is totally worth your time. And what do you have for number 3?
Well, I want to say one more thing about number 3 on yours with Dark Matter is it sounds like they took the interesting concept of Sliders. Do you remember Sliders, the Jerry O'Connell sci-fi show on Fox from the late 90s?
Maybe.
That's what it was. Like, they were trying to get back home through multiple dimensions, and because, they hadn't really talked about multiverse, that wouldn't have flown in the 90s. Like, they were going to multiple dimensions, and it was always, like, just one detail off. Like, and then I believe they got back to their home one time and then didn't know it, and it was, like, heartbreaking. And but that's what it was. But it was a 90s sci-fi show where you couldn't really do anything like you were talking about in Dark Matter, where it feels like it matters, like where it feels so emotionally connecting, I guess, emotionally, the words are failing me tonight, impactful.
I felt emotionally impacted by the book. That's a good way to put it. Whereas a lot of other sci-fi, I think it's cool, I think it's interesting, I connect with it. This one actually left an impact on me in a way that not a lot of stuff does anymore, because I can usually kind of see what's coming in a story. This had twists and turns that I did not see coming, which is rare.
That sounds
very
awesome
rare for me. Yeah, but what did you have for number 3?
My number 3 is actually my Cosmere reread, where I'm going through all of the Brandon Sanderson Cosmere books and going back over them again from the beginning of Mistborn to Oathbringer as it comes out, that just came out. And I'm appreciating this series so much more once I've started from the very beginning and going through. I'm seeing so many more things that there's no way I could have known the first time through that I saw in the Mistborn books, that I've seen now that I've read Arcanum Unbounded, that now that I have started on the Stormlight Archives and know what happened on the greater scale within kind of this cosmic godhood that they've set up through the stuff with like Preservation and Ruin, and Rust and Ruin's what they said in the second book as a swear, or the second trilogy as a swear, with Preservation and Ruin and all of the stuff with Honor, that I had no idea the stuff that they were talking about with Honor in the second, or in the Stormlight Archive, was dealing with like a shattering of a god from years ago, and now that they're working on all of the stuff with like the Shard Blades and the Void Bringers and the World Singers, all of this stuff tying together is so much more in depth and intertwined than you can even begin to comprehend until you have read every bit of it.
I didn't know you had read Arcanum Unbounded. I know we talked about you doing it, but I didn't know you actually got to it.
I've read most of it.
Okay.
That the only one that I haven't read is, I think, White Sand is the only one that I haven't gotten through.
Well, and that's a weird one because it also is a comic book that was taken, and like it's like a chapter out of that. I think off the air at some point you have to explain the Cosmere to me, because I've read literally everything that you have read for the Cosmere, and I don't actually understand how it fits together.
Okay.
Like, yeah, that's a bigger discussion. We don't have space for it right now, but like, I like the Cosmere, but I don't actually like grok the Cosmere. And it seems like you do.
It comes in as one of those things where I clicked just recently, because this is the specific kind of collected narrative that I've always been interested in. Like the Stephen King Dark Tower stuff, that's what drew me in. And then you have these kinds of connected universes where people don't necessarily essentially just say what's connected. You have like the Marvel Cinematic Universe that's all connected, and there's not really anything greater than that. With the Cosmere, it kind of takes the idea of a connected universe, and then you have Brandon Sanderson, who, honestly, let's just say it, he overthinks everything and has all of this hyperdiegetical knowledge and apocrypha out there where once you've read all of it and you've got this idea in your head, and the reason that I can say it, that I have more of a grasp on, is because this has basically been all I've read like in a row for the last like year here, and with it all connecting and all of it doing this, it makes sense because I can see all of it at once. It's kind of like I got high on spice. It's like and I'm now one of the Spacers Guild, and I can like see all of this.
I could see how that would make it way different, because like I've read them so disconnected over the years. I think it would almost take a reread, that's so much time. Like I just don't have that time.
It's so much time, and I can honestly say that I don't like rereading stuff, that I tend to want to read new stuff, and that rereading this has been honestly one of the most fulfilling like challenges I've set myself in terms of reading that I can remember. It's like, it's so much better than rereading like the Harry Potter books or the Dark Tower books, as much as I love them, that kind of thing. It's like this, I feel, is big, and I can't wait until the Cosmere, like the Stormlight Archive, gets to book 5, because he said that book 5 of the Cosmere is going to be a 10-book series, or the Stormlight Archive is going to be a 10-book series, and it's going to be in 2 separate arcs, with the first 5 and the second 5. So I'm really excited for the end of the first 5, that we're going to know a whole lot more in terms of the overall story than we do even probably at the end of book 3, because of the other books that he's going to be putting out too. Like it's crazy intertwined and intricate, and I'm seeing so much stuff in the Stormlight Archive that without Arcanum Unbounded and having reread Mistborn, that there's absolutely no way I would have noticed any of it. That there's no way you could have known any of it. That's the thing. It's there, and it's like, okay, this happened, and it's like, oh, Shadesmar, okay, whatever. And then now I'm like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, I need to read all of it. Oh my God, where's Oathbringer? I need to read this and know new stuff. And it's like, I don't remember all of the old stuff yet. So like I've gotten really excited about the Cosmere, if you can't tell. Like that's why it's number 3 on my list of this year. Like it's so good.
I'm excited to talk to you about it after I finish the next Stormlight Archive book, which is like, it's literally my next thing to read, I think, probably. Because I need to reconnect on the Cosmere, but I'm glad that like you enjoyed your time rereading it, because I don't know if I would be able to enjoy that, because I've read them already. I have trouble rereading also, unless something's fantastic. But
I thought I was going to have a hard time with it. I really did. But going back at the beginning of Mistborn, I realized how great they were and why I fell in love with it in the first place. And it just kind of like, yep, I know exactly what's going to happen now, but I don't care. I love these characters. And so what's your number 2?
My number 2 is The Adventure Zone, again, it was last year. But I'm calling out 2 specific arcs. So last year, it was like The Adventure Zone was a new podcast to me and to everybody, and it grabbed me. But the 2 final arcs in the Balance like saga or Balance arc or whatever they ended up calling like the first big story they did were called The Stolen Century and Story and Song, and they were so good. They were just so good. Like I have never felt like a live play D&D or any system, any live play that I've listened to, I've never felt that it ended in such like an emotional and impactful manner, but this one did. Right. And it really landed and it stuck the landing, and it was amazing. And now they've moved on to other stuff. Wow. They're experimenting with new systems. They're kind of switching around so that the person who is the DM for everything now gets to be a player sometimes, and they're rotating the DM spot. They're trying to figure out what they want to be their next deep dive into a new system and a new universe and a new setting and everything from scratch. But it's not what it was before. And they will probably get back there eventually, but right now they're just experimenting, which is, I mean, hey, if you put that much time into one giant story and you stick the landing, you have to take a break. Like, I don't blame them at all. But just looking back a little bit earlier in the year to the end of the Balance arc, and the Stolen Century especially was amazing. It was basically like the characters that we have had the whole adventure with in the D&D world suddenly find out something major about their past, and the DM kicked them into a different system that he homebrewed that went back and relived their last 100 years of their lives and tied all of it back into the narrative that had happened up to that point. Like, it was such an amazing act of DMing. I can't believe that he pulled it off. And listening to the Stolen Century, that, 100 years that they covered in there, I was blown away by the amount of things that he was able to tie back in because he had put all of these hints throughout the entire adventure for the past, year or 2 years or however long it had been. It was astounding. I don't know anything else that compares to it. I've listened to plenty of other live plays and I like them for other reasons, but in terms of pure story in a live play, you can't beat the Adventure Zone. So yeah, that is why it is my number 2.
I've never heard a bad thing about the Adventure Zone.
It's because it's good. It's really, really good. What was your number 2? You had another podcast too. We both had a podcast at number 2.
So mine is S-Town, and I talked a lot about this earlier, and the more I've thought about it this year, and I know that this is one of the reasons that you said true crime was one of my things, but this isn't a true crime podcast. That you think it is, and it's not. That this is absolutely not a true crime at all. This is a Southern Gothic novel. That this is like if Flannery O'Connor had... If somebody had read Flannery O'Connor and decided, you know what, I should live my life like that. That's what S-Town is. It is a grotesque Southern Gothic novel that is an experience that I am baffled that these people are real and that this stuff happened 2 hours from where I live. But at the same time, I listened to this and it is one of the only things, like The Handmaid's Tale made me emotional for a different reason. And I'm super excited about the Cosmere. It gets me excited in an intellectual way, like being able to tie all of these puzzle pieces together and see a bigger picture. And then S-Town makes me very somber. It affects me where I feel as though my life is richer having listened to this entire story, where you can listen to an episode of it and be like, okay, that'd be fine. That's well put together. It's an NPR podcast. Okay. And then if you listen to the entire thing, if you go through from beginning to end, you listen to all 7 episodes of it, and you pay attention to it. And that was what really changed my mind on this podcast, is that it is one that you don't listen to in the background. This is a sit down and actively pay attention to the story that is being told, the people who you are getting to know, and by the end of it, you come out the other side with a greater understanding of humanity and human relationships. It is as literary as Logan was a comic book movie. S-Town is absolutely something that I think should be taught in the classroom for narrative arc, scripting, and honestly characterization, because of the way that these people were able to portray the way that these creators were able to portray these people in this town. That it is an astonishing act of storytelling.
Cool. That's good. I'm glad that you liked it. I should probably listen to it. I will probably do it eventually. I just don't know when. I got to psych myself up for it in the right way.
You do. And that's the thing. I wasn't going to listen to this because I listened to 2 episodes of Serial and decided that was not my kind of podcast. I didn't care. And it was like, yep, these people, that happened. This sucks. Like this is terrible. But don't care. And with S-Town, Jennifer got me to listen to it. Everybody around me was listening to it. So when I sat down and paid attention to it, it hooked me for all of the right reasons. And it's short enough that I really do think that because you like storytelling and that craft of putting everything together, that it is so well put together as both a podcast and a story, that if you're willing to put the time in and just listen to this, I think that you will actually like this one.
I will put it in my backlog, and I have to be in the right mood, but I'll do it eventually. I just don't know when. So I'm not making any promises.
That's the way I am for a re-listen too. It's like I need to listen to S-Town again. And I'm like, nah, man. Nah.
Yeah, so I'll get to it. I'll get to it at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, now we get to our number one, which is really weird because
super weird.
Full disclosure, the way that the weeks fell this year, we are recording this on December 12th. And like we said up front, there wasn't as much that stood out this year. And in my mind, knowing myself the way I do, which I feel like I'm pretty good at knowing myself, I don't see any way that my number one could not possibly be my number one. That being said, it's The Last Jedi, which I haven't seen yet. And you have the same thing.
I mean, it's The Last Jedi.
We're saying number one is The Last Jedi, and it's weird because you have no hype for it. I have a lot of hype for it. I could be disappointed. You could be like overjoyed. But from what I've seen and like reading between the lines of the trailers and how much I love Star Wars, I don't see how it can't be number one. So I'm calling it. The thing for you guys is you're going to listen to this 2 episodes after we've recorded our Last Jedi episode.
Right.
Which is weird. It's just the way the timing worked out. So when you're listening to this, you're going to know my impressions of this movie more than I do. And if I'm wrong and it should not be number one, that is the first thing we will talk about when we come back with season 3.
Yes.
But we are calling it in the blind. Basically.
Yes, we are.
I'm calling it. Like, my number one is going to be The Last Jedi. I just know it.
And now it is entirely possible for us in the, seeing it in a couple of days and looking at it and saying, like, no, that shouldn't have been number one based on how we feel about this other stuff. And we could go back and edit the podcast, but we're not going to do that.
No, we're not going to do that.
No, because it's going to give us a really good discussion if that happens. Yep. This one, we're calling 8 Ball in the corner pocket right now, y'all. This one is going to be our number one. That the trailers have put so much stuff out there that we know are going to already hit on the things that we love about Star Wars the most.
Yes.
This is going to hit on the gray area of the Force for Void.
Yes.
This is going to deal a lot with like human redemption and like character motivation between Kylo Ren and Leia, that there's going to be so much just humanity in this, as well as we're going to find out about Snoke and things like this. There's no way that unless they totally drop the ball, I mean totally drop the ball.
Here's the thing too. They wouldn't have given this director/writer a trilogy if he dropped the ball. He is doing the next standalone Star Wars trilogy. You don't get that approval from Lucasfilm and Disney and Kathleen Kennedy if you did not knock it out of the park. So
prior to the release,
no fan reactions yet. I just don't see any way. It has to be number one for me. It has to be.
And I like Rian Johnson in his other work. That Looper is one of my favorite sci-fi movies, and I think it has one bad scene in it. It has a terrible, terrible scene where Bruce Willis goes through and shoots everybody up that feels completely out of place, and I'm pretty sure that was put in there because of the studio being like, hey, you have to give Bruce Willis a Bruce Willis scene. Other than that, I'm fully confident that Rian Johnson is able to do this movie, and like you said, they gave him his other trilogy before people even saw this movie.
Yes.
It wasn't fully edited by the time that he got that. So,
but if you guys want to know why we love The Last Jedi, go back 2 episodes to us in the future for us, in the past for you, and you can learn why. And if we are completely wrong right now, we will talk about it next week. Oh man, I love this time travel stuff that has to happen in November and December. It's interesting. Okay, with all that said, no weekly geekery. We don't do that for these end of the year episodes because we literally just recorded a different podcast like 10 minutes before we started this one. Really quick, we want to talk about next season. We're probably going to aim for slightly shorter episodes. Not actually short episodes, but our range has always been that like 45 minutes to like an hour 20. That's kind of our sweet spot. And next year, next season, which will be next episode for you guys, we're going to start trying to aim more for that 45 to 50-ish mark and try to stay under an hour. It's not always going to happen. I'm not going to promise that. But we were talking about just like the amount of time we have, the amount of time I have to edit, and like the way that our workloads are going in our personal lives. I don't feel burnout, but I see the edges of what could potentially in the future far off be burnout if we keep going at the pace we're at. And I don't like, I love the podcast, so I don't want that to happen.
Yes.
So
this is the highlight of my week in a lot of ways.
Yeah, me too. And it's like, because of that, we're going to go back and we're going to do, we're going to target like the lower end of our typical range. So this probably means that when we do a really deep dive on a topic, it'll be an episode where it's just the topic without geekery. And then it probably means there are going to be episodes that are straight up just geekery and us catching up, like we did a couple episodes back when we just did our like chatting and catching up episode. And then there's going to be other ones where we can identify a shorter topic and we can do a short topic plus our normal geekery, and it'll have the exact same format as always. So it's not actually changing that much, but this is just kind of us like putting a flag in the ground and stating our intentions to be slightly shorter. Like the shorter end of our typical range is what we're going to aim for starting with season 3.
And we did set out at the beginning of this podcast with the idea that every year, every season that we were going to do this, we were going to try to change it up so that nothing became stale. And we think that being organic about it really is a good way to do it. We're not making arbitrary changes. We're not saying, oh, we need to talk less just because we need to talk less. It's something that we want to be topics-based, concise, and still be able to have the discussion and community interaction from you guys that we love so much. We've gotten good reactions from both of these kinds of episodes in the past, so we really think that that's a direction to go that will, like you said, like Void said a minute ago, a little more sustainable for the long term if we're able to be a lot more concise.
Yep. So we'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, I mean, we have a format that works and we like it, so we adjust on the fly. But that's us stating our intentions for next season. That's about it for right now. You can write us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. Our email address, as always, is geek2geekcast@gmail.com, or reach us on Twitter @geek2geekcast. We also have longer discussion threads on our subreddit at reddit.com/r/geek2geekcast.
And we're on Slack too if you're not a Redditor, so go to slack.geek2geekcast.com for your invite. And we are part of a podcast network, you guys. You need to be listening to The Comic Box, Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea, and Geek to Two with Joe. So head over to geek2geekcast.com and subscribe and review each and every single one of those shows.
Yes, I blog at agreenmushroom.com. You can find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter as @Professor Beej. That's Beej with 2 E's, and I blog at geekfitness.net.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek to Geek podcast. That'll do it for this week and for this season also. See you next season, geeks.
Happy New Year, geeks.
That too. Good job. Nailed it.
Comics. Hey everyone, this is Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek.
And this is Liam, the languishing, lascivious Liam of Langley.
Wow, that was extremely illiterate of you.
Well, I try.
We are the hosts of The Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network.
So, join us.
Bop, bop.
Oh, yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Katie.
And I'm Chelsea, and we're the hosts of the podcast
Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea.
We are two best friends who love pop culture. We try to have a female perspective on things, but we really just talk about anything we like. What are some recent topics we've done, Katie?
Well, we've talked about girl power songs, Wonder Woman, Veronica Mars, young adult fiction novels, San Diego Comic-Con, and so much more. So grab your cup of tea or whatever your drink of choice is and download our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher and start listening today.
Hi, my name is Joe Hogan, and I'm a geek. And if you're currently listening to this, there's a good chance you're a geek too. So check out my podcast, Geektitude. Each week, I talk with somebody about their geek aptitude. Sometimes I talk to people in a geeky profession. Sometimes it's someone doing something really cool with their geekiness. Often it's another geeky podcaster. But it's always someone who wants to share their inner geek. So join me each week as we come together to geek out about all the geeky stuff we love. And remember, this week, keep it geek.